Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
That's right, you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast here on the Nerd Party Network. I am John Mills, Jedi Master John Mills, if you will, and joining me on this quest of Aggressive Negotiations is my dear friend, my esteemed Jedi Scholar compatriot, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, we're going to be digging into something pretty darn interesting today. Are you ready for the journey?
I'm ready. I'm super excited. Let's do it.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm also glad to hear that people know to go to thenerdparty.com/contact to reach out to us. We did get some emails recently. We have not had the opportunity to reply or work them into the show, but we will, we promise. Thank you for your notes. We get to them the best that we can. We're busy Jedi Masters going out through the galaxy right now. You can also find the show at the Jedi Masters on Twitter. You can find the network at Join Nerd Party on Twitter or the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, Matt is at MattRushing02 on your social media network of choice, and I am, of course, Kessel Junkie. So here we are, Matt. And we are in a space right now with Star Wars where we're getting many more shows. Mm-hmm. Shows used to mean animated shows, and now they mean live-action shows. And there is a difference in how animation and live-action works, and there's been some complaint about the translation of characters from animation to live-action. There have been complaints about Ahsoka's Leku. There have been complaints about Cad Bane's face. There have been complaints about the Grand Inquisitor's look in the Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer. And I think this is an interesting thing because you were talking about this before we started recording, but what do you think it is? What is the special challenge here? Why are fans not reacting warmly to seeing these animation characters brought to live action? Is there an actual problem with the translation of the characters from one medium to another? Or do you think there's something else at play?
Well, I do think the first thing that goes along with this actually comes from the same thing that we had with the EU and then the acceptance of especially the sequels, which is you spent so much time with something and then you come in to it again, and it's different, and there's a part of you that's just, you're so used to it being one way, and when it's not that way anymore, you kind of are frustrated with that. It's difficult to deal with the change. It just feels off. It feels strange, and so I think one of the things is that I truly understand as the why this is the case. Your brain gets used to something looking the same way or sounding the same way. So when you think of the big change you got with Ahsoka, that it's not voiced by Ashley Eckstein anymore. The character doesn't look quite the same. It's very jarring. Especially when I would say like a character like Ahsoka, where because it's animated, the voice meant so much, to the creation of the character and bringing it to life. I mean, it's so I think I want to say up front, like I can totally understand why feeling this way, because I remember when Ashley was not cast to be in the Mandalorian as Ahsoka, and it was somebody else, and they weren't going to do any voice dubbing or anything, so it was definitely going to be different, and it was a hard thing to to deal with personally, right? But at the same time, I think I have to remember, like books to movies, it's a different medium. And so you can't translate a book page for page on screen because, otherwise it's not a movie, it's a television show. And so, and even at that point, it's not going to be perfect. Just ask Wheel of Time. I think there's so much that kind of goes into this right there at the beginning, and part of that just comes from familiarity. And that familiarity breeds kind of contempt for anything changing our beloved, insert here, Grand Inquisitor, Cad Bane, Ahsoka Tano, anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it is definitely complicated by the fact that these characters originated in the animated realm, and now they're being brought into the live-action realm. And the way that I deal with it, and the reason that I personally, there's no other way I can say this, but I'm not saying it in a dismissive fashion. The only reason I don't care is because I flip it. And I say to myself, well, would I mind if these changes were made when I brought a live-action character and put them into animation?
Right.
For instance, Yoda is not voiced by Frank Oz in the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea the knockdown, drag-out arguments I had with one of my friends who was so upset that Frank Oz was not doing the voice of Yoda in the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Because his opinion was there's no reason not to. You should have Yoda being voiced by Yoda. Nobody else should do Yoda's voice. And I was saying, well, there are practical considerations to bring into play. And in addition to that, it's a different medium, like you're saying with these characters. Matt Lanter has played Anakin longer than Hayden Christensen ever has. They're both Anakin to me. James Arnold Taylor, he's played Obi-Wan longer than I think Ewan McGregor's been alive at this point. I kid. But, he's played him. And remember that they brought in, I believe it's Steven Stanton, to do older Obi-Wan in Rebels instead of bringing in James Arnold Taylor. And even then, there was a bit of a reaction to that. And you have Sam Witwer doing Maul for so long to the point that when Maul reappears in Solo: A Star Wars Story, they use him instead of Peter Serafinowicz. So there's very much a back and forth here. But I was able to be okay with Lanter and Taylor doing two characters who are very near and dear to my heart in the movies and that are coming back to do them in the shows now. Is it that you can't help it? It's an emotional reaction, not a logical one.
I think there is such an investment with these characters. There's such an investment of time and, all of those things. I think it's interesting because I think that with each one, there are different realities they go into. So I'll bring up Ahsoka in The Mandalorian. And one of the things to which Dave was very conscious of, he was very involved with the creation of the costume for Ahsoka. It's, Ahsoka's his baby. And one of the things that they had to figure out was, the only time we've seen Togrutan's on screen, Shaak Ti, and mostly in the background. And, of course, very long Mon tails. And, because she's in the background, you're not as conscious of what does the character look like up close. What are those Mon tails? What is the reaction when you've got big fight scenes and everything? How does all that really work in live action? When in animation, that's not a problem, right? Because everything is animated and everything looks consistent and flows consistently. And the problem is that, in all honesty, Twi'leks haven't looked great in the live action shows that we've gotten so far. Their Laku just don't look right. They look like kind of like foam things hanging off somebody's head. It's a difficult thing to do unless you're going to do the George Lucas route, which would be give them a blue head cap to wear, and then you add a digital creation later. Yeah. You're not doing that for a television show. So there's all of these realities that come into play that we don't even think about when it comes to the thought process of creating a live action version of a character who's only been in animation before. I think that you bringing up the idea of even just like how the voice talent has changed for all these characters, and part of that is just basically choosing what's right and best for that story and that presentation. I do think that comes into play with the idea of why characters might look differently in live action than they do in animation, and that it's done to work to serve the story the best that you possibly can. And I think I trust the creators of these shows so far in that, because I feel like for the most part they've proven themselves to be trustworthy and to have put tons of thought into why things look the way they do. And so I don't know, does any of that make sense?
It does make sense. I mean, it's somebody else took the bull by the horns here on social media before I went on my Lenten fast from social media, and they were very witty, where they said, yes, and Count Dooku doesn't look like Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
And they used Photoshop to turn Christopher Lee into the way Dooku looks in the Clone Wars, and it looks funny. I do think that the special challenge with somebody like Ahsoka or the Grand Inquisitor is that people need to put themselves in the mindset of what they saw in Clone Wars and or Rebels was a stylistic choice. And if you look at Vader and then how Vader looks in Rebels, I would argue that you would say, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Well, Rebels obviously is not photorealistic. Therefore, when this character comes forward into live action,
right,
that's why those differences exist. Ahsoka, I think, in particular, is more difficult because so many of the long-term fans, like ourselves, have such a pronounced emotional attachment to her that Rosario Dawson, the fact that I accept her as Ahsoka, speaks to your point about trusting the creators.
Right.
Because I went in with a huge mental block, like everybody else, saying, prove it to me that it can work. And they proved it to me that it could work. And I said, okay, that's Ahsoka. And that's why, on the basis of when we're having this discussion, a large part of it is the reaction to the Grand Inquisitor in the Kenobi trailer. And there are two things with that. For all I know, this is a Grand Inquisitor, not the Grand Inquisitor. There could be two of them.
Now, there are two of them.
Yeah, this is getting out of hand. But let's set that aside. I'm looking at something that is a fragment, that is a piece. And I just have to contextualize those sorts of things and say exactly like I said with Ahsoka. Did we get any preview piece of Ahsoka before Mando Season 2 premiered?
There were rumors that she was going to come out, or that she was going to be part of the season. There's absolutely nothing, though, released on... I mean, you just saw her in the episode. She just showed up, so...
Do you think that is the error at play here? That they have not given us an opportunity to see the Grand Inquisitor in context of his first scene? Is it possible that it would have been smarter just to have the Grand Inquisitor's voice and not his face appear in the trailer?
Yeah, and I mean, that's obviously an interesting thing, too, because, the voice is done specifically by Jason Isaacs, who's a very distinctive voice, and as far as we know, will not be, the voice of the Grand Inquisitor in the show. And so, I think that's another thing that people are kind of somewhat lamenting about the Grand Inquisitor as well is again, animation is so much about voice. And that is one of the things that, regardless of how you liked Cad Bane's look, it was the same voice, right? So Corey Burton doing the voice, you immediately can kind of accept the character more readily, even if he doesn't look quite the same, which, also at the same time, he's a lot older than the last time we saw him as well. So that also helps too. I mean, who knows what a Duro looks like as they age. So, I mean, there's lots of things that go into that, right? His face could just get puffier and, whatever. With the Grand Inquisitor, one of the things that it comes down to is the fact that, we've seen Utapauans on screen before. We kind of have an idea what they look like. They were in episode 3. And the Grand Inquisitor looks very similar to what we saw there in animation. They mirror that very closely. Now, also, the Utapauans didn't do anything. They literally just stood there. There were no action sequences they needed or anything like that. And so the reality of, again, creating a character that is going to be more action-oriented when you give them a massive headpiece, that can create issues, I think, for, doing that's one of the things they said with Ahsoka, right? You have this massive headpiece and everything, and it just makes those action sequences, even for a stunt double, much more difficult. So, yeah, I think it's just a tricky ground to be on, right? And I think one of the things that we should be more excited of is just to say, we're getting the Grand Inquisitor, we're getting Ahsoka, we're getting Cad Bane, instead of being like, oh, well, it doesn't look right. Like, you just sound like comic book guy. That is an autographed picture of Sean Connery signed by Roger Moore. It is worth $150. Like, that's kind of as what we come off as, instead of just being thankful that what they're doing with these shows is helping to connect all of Star Wars together in a way that we never thought would happen.
Amen and hallelujah. I don't care what they look like so much as the fact that they are legitimizing my love for the normies, because I'll get my wife to watch Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that will be an opportunity for me when she says, who's that guy, to finally download some information to her, because she's never going to watch the animated stuff. And it legitimizes all of that, and it gets me to just evangelize all the great work that so many people have done through the years to keep my love, keep the flame alive. 2 things, though. 1, let's just be glad they are not trying to do a live-action version using makeup of the Utai as opposed to the Utapau, the Utapauans or whatever, right? Number 2, slightly different tactic here. Final question to round things out, because this is where my heart goes as we're talking about the Inquisitors and live action. Do you think they make my love, my dreams come true, Matt? Do you think we take the true leap from animation to live action and give me a helicopter lightsaber? Yes, no, and why yes?
Well, we're getting the spinning lightsabers. We already know that.
Yes. So, not too far off from the helicopter lightsaber, my friend.
I pray that we don't get the helicopter lightsabers, but
you mean do? You pray
I
we
would
do.
not be surprised at all if we do.
You realize if I get a live action helicopter lightsaber, I will in fact pause the show, because I will be weeping with joy so much.
I know. You'll probably just be texting me about it too.
Your phone will not. You'll have to go like offline to avoid those text messages, because I will say, that's right. That's right. They are officially live action now, because helicopter lightsabers are fantastic. But what else is fantastic, my friend, is where people can reach you online. Where can they find you out there on the wilds of the internet?
Of course, if you are in wild space, also known as the interwebs, you can find me all over the place under the name Matt Rushing02. So Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero. You can also find me here on the network. I did a Finnish show with Drea Kaufman called Owl Post. We talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. You can also find me over on the TFM network. We have done, and I do quite a few shows over there. One whole side of the network devoted to all of the fandoms we love called the 602 Club. So we don't just talk about one fandom, we talk about a bunch. Plus there's some bonus shows that I do there with you, John Mills, where we talk about some very focused things like we did Snyder Cuts, and we're doing Assembling Avengers, so great shows to check out. You can also find me doing The Orb, Warp 5, Literary Treks, and The Artificial Tango. The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Warp 5 is about Star Trek Enterprise. Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek, and The Artificial Tango is about Star Trek Picard, as Chris Jones and I are walking through every single episode of Picard Season 2. John, I'm exhausted after that list, so where could people find you?
Well, gosh, you could look online and find Kessel Junkie, KESSELJUNKIE. I'm taking a sabbatical from most of social media right now. As we record this, you can find me on Letterboxd talking about movies. You can find me on Goodreads talking about books, where I warn you, though, I even go to controversial territory, because I will not be dissuaded or barred from viewing anything and everything out there. You can find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell, where we talk about the movies of different directors divided by decade or eras of their career or their entire career, what have you. And like Matt said, you can find me over on the TFM network, appearing on Assembling Avengers and Snyder Cuts as part of the 602 Club feed. But Matt, I found that my helicopter lightsaber is a little bit on the fritz, so I think I need to take it into the Jedi Temple shop. So I think it is time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Helicopter lightsabers rule.
Join the Nerd Party.